the Hypno Lions Roar, the podcast with Pete. Have an interesting subject today, another one. All my subjects are interesting, but this one is particularly interesting because it kind of hit a nerve with me. And when I hit a nerve, there's a certain level of irritation factor that goes along with hitting that nerve. Uh, the title of this talk today is the all important want to. Want to. Now, those two words are easy to understand. Want to. They're hard to implement. Now, I was watching the news the other day. Well, I say the other day, yesterday, and there was a news story on it about a teacher getting attacked by a student because she took his phone away. And the teachers in the schools have been having massive issues with kids and having phones in the classroom. And the teachers at school have asked them, do not use your phone during class. But that has not worked. And if a kid is using their phone during class and the teacher is trying to teach them on a particular subject, regardless of what that subject is, they can't concentrate on two things like that at once because there has to be a certain level of consciousness in that focus. And you can't do that. You can only consciously think about or focus on one thing at a time. And if you try to do it on two, you bounce from one thing to the other, and if you end up not doing both of them very well. So you have to focus. But anyway, she took the phone away from the child. The child demanded to get it back. She said, you'll get it back after class. You were told not to use the phone during class, not to attack this. And he proceeded to attack the teacher, a rather large student attacking a rather small female teacher. And along the way, he had spewed certain viewpoints towards her ethnicity, and that you would call that being racist. The problem I have with racist, and this is a different subject matter, is there are no different races. We have one race, and that's the human race. We have different ethnicities, but there are no races. So this whole racist thing is just a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, I digress. So he attacked the teacher. The police were called. The student was arrested, and the parents were called into the school, actually the police station, to pick him up. At which time, lo and behold, there was a press conference waiting for the parents to walk out of the police station with their rather large child. Now, the parent did not discipline the child for doing what he did. What she did is attack the teacher. She attacked the system. She attacked the school. But yet she's sending her child there to be educated. And why is she wanting him educated? Well, to prepare him for life, to learn math skills, learn English skills, to learn about history, all the things that education is supposed to entail. Now, I gotta go back a little bit, and I'll pick this up here in just a moment. But when I was in school back in the 70s, late 60s, 70s, and specifically high school or even junior high. Now, I wasn't the most perfect kid. I did what kids do, and the teachers were quick to mete out or distribute out discipline. And that discipline usually entailed a warning, maybe two. But after that, it was, okay, we're going to step out into the hall. And each teacher in that school had a paddle, either in their desk or hanging on the wall or whatever. And that paddle was used to realign attitudes to get focused back in that child. And there were times that I was pulled out in the hallway and we used to call them back when I was going to school, getting licks. And it could be 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 licks. But usually those 4 licks got you back in line with what you were supposed to do. And it was a message to the other students that goes, I'm not going out there. And that's how discipline was meted out. Now, discipline is an interesting thing. Laws are an interesting thing. The thing that keeps law-abiding citizens within the law is fear of the consequences. And that's exactly what the teacher demonstrated, was the fear of the consequences. You do not follow this, then this is what happens. Now, there was no running home and telling my parents or my grandparents that I was pulled out into the hallway and got licks. It wasn't going to happen. And the reason it didn't happen, and the reason I didn't want them to know, was this: if they did know, that I would get not licks, but I'd get a whooping when I got home or later that afternoon. And it wasn't about, well, the teacher did this and they said this and it was unfair and blah, blah. My parents, my grandparents, they did not care what I had to say. The teachers were right. You're there to learn. You're there to sit down. You're there to shut up. You're there to do your job. And your job is to go to school and get educated. And you're to do that to the best of your ability. Although that wasn't the words that were used. You're going to do this or else is I think the words that I heard. So I didn't want my parents to know that I had gotten licks at school, because no amount of pleading or whatever and saying, hey, yeah, but the teacher, they didn't want to hear it, because the teacher was right. The school was right. You do what you're supposed to do. Now, let's go back to the parents outside the police station picking up this rather large individual who basically he beat the shit out of a teacher, a female teacher. The unfortunate and sad thing was that the other kids in the class they all had their phones, were videotaping the whole thing, were videoing it on their phones, digitating or whatever. And that's really, really sad state of affair. So the parents went on and said that they're this and they're going to file a lawsuit, and they had the lawyer there and blah, 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 blah. And after that, I don't know what happened to it. And it really doesn't matter at this point. But the one thing that we have failed to realize in our society, where we think that people are being underserved, where people are being not given the opportunities that other people have or that other students have. The one thing that's missing from those people, those students, is the want to. In order to do anything in life, you have to have the want to do that thing in life. And that want to sometimes comes at a price of, maybe you don't want to, but you do it anyway. Maybe you need to do it. You have to do it. And if you need to do it and you have to do it, then why not just want to do it? Why spend all the time fighting the system, interrupting the class to prevent other students from learning that want to, all because a knothead is in school and his parents are not supporting the system in which they send their kid to, rather large kid, to learn. Now, when this kid gets to the point to where he needs to graduate high school, he's not going to have the grades. He's not going to have the class hours. He should not be able to graduate, because he doesn't possess the knowledge, the skill set behind what a diploma, high school diploma, should represent. And that's unfortunate. But the school, in all likelihood, is going to close one eye and look at the grades kind of fuzzy like and go, oh, that's a passing grade. And they're going to allow that individual, that rather large individual who beat the shit out of that teacher, to get his diploma. And then they're going to turn him loose in, into society. And once he goes into society, he is an adult at that point, what we call an adult. Now, the boy probably can't spell cat with a dictionary. He probably can't add 2 plus 2 together without pulling out a phone and going to the calculator. He's not going to listen to an employer. In all likelihood, he's going to repeat what he exactly did in that school, is beat the shit out of his teacher. Because I can guarantee you this is not the first episode that this rather large individual had in school. I'd be willing to lay money on it. Sizable, and I don't gamble, except on when it's a sure thing. But that possession of the want to is, I'm not sure that you can teach that. I'm not sure that you can force somebody to have it, to develop it. But at some point in time in their life, they're going to have to come face to face with that want to. Now, there are many kids nowadays that graduate high school and are even graduating college that continue to live with mommy and daddy. And they do not possess the want to. They may have gone to college and they may have attended a few classes, but when the latest round of protests came around, they were usually the first ones on the front line, having probably no idea what they're protesting about, other than the fact that I don't have to be in class. I don't have to be in class to learn anything. I can be out here and take the easy way out and remain stupid and protest about something that is not going to have an impact on my life, other than the fact that I get to do what I want. I could get to have multicolored hair and piercings everywhere and tattoos all up and down this and whatever, and speak to people in a way that is degrading. And the very things that they protest about are the things that they want for themselves. And what they want respect. And that's a very odd way of getting respect, because respect is earned, it's not given. Now, you can deserve to be treated in a respectful way, but you're probably not getting respect. Back in the old days, if you acted in certain ways, there was no respect. There was a time that you would be pulled back into the alleyway and have the shit beat out of you. And then you either come around to the way that everybody acts, or you're going to get the shit beat out of you again. In the Army, when I was in the Army, it was the tail end of, the Vietnam War had been over for a number of years when I went in, and there was a transition in the military. But there was a thing in the military that if a soldier in the unit was a screw up and he couldn't get his act together, there was a thing called a blanket party. And they would throw a blanket party for that individual to uh, to encourage stepping up his game, because his failure to follow or step up his game affected the entire unit. And while I was in, I experienced, no, I mean, I didn't have a blanket party thrown for me. I watched, well, I may have participated in one or two, because it affected everybody in the unit. It was an attitude readjustment period. But those days are gone in the military. We have become weak in that way. And look, I there as far as I'm concerned, when I was a kid that, two kids had a fight out behind the school or that, it's the police was never called. It was dealt with in the principal's office, and it usually meant harshly. It could have been that you're going to get expelled for a few days, but before you get expelled, you're going to get some licks by the vice principal, who was typically a retired coach who had a very good arm on him. And those licks could be heard through the hallways of that high school or that junior high. And people would whisper and say, I don't want to go there. You see, because the fear of consequences is what keeps people in line. If you don't fear the consequences, and you can look at this and at our prisons, our prisons are overflowing with people who do not care about the consequences of society, of a society, our society, who want to shortcut the system by either thieving or stealing or doing drugs or selling drugs and infecting our young people, our children. And the very fact that those drugs are coming over the border of Mexico, very close to where I live, I can, on a windy day, if I threw a rock, that rock would land on the border of Texas and Mexico. But the very fact that those drugs are coming over from Mexico into our country, either by roads or by water, the river, sneaking over. And we have people that are supposed to be in charge of those borders to protect us, to protect everyone, every citizen in our country, that aren't doing their job. And it seems that those who try to do their job are demonized for attempting to do that job. But that's a different focus and a different subject matter. The want to. The want to. How do you instill the want to into a child where the parents don't care about the want to? The parents care about you going to school, getting out of their hair for a certain period of time, and that other people are in charge of your child. But when they come home, you don't ask about homework, or you don't force homework, or you don't take the basketball away or take the video games away or say you're grounded. And if you overstep the bounds of that grounding, there are consequences to that, which are, in my household, was not going to be a pleasant thing. So how do you instill that? I wished I knew. Now, I have people that come to me every day that I work with, clients, that the very thing that they want to work on is confidence, being focused, completing task, amongst many other things. And that all comes down to the want to. Now they want to. But maybe in their past, they did not have the want to when they were younger because they didn't have to. You see, because want to and have to are two sides to the coin. The want to came from the have to. It was demanded. That's where the caregiver came in. You have to do this. Because if you don't, you're going to face the consequences. And if I don't force the consequences on to you now, to where you develop that want to, when you become an adult, that's going to be hard for you. It's going to be hard for you because you're going to look at everybody as, well, they're not being fair. They're picking on me because of this and because of that and because of all the tattoos I have on my face, or because I want to present myself as I want to. And that business really wants to present a certain image of their business to their clientele, and that is done through their employees. So there's a certain way that they want their employees, but that's not fair. And so the cycle continues until one day, one year leads to the next year, and soon 5 years are gone, and you've gotten out of school and you're now 23. And you continue to play the games and live life however you want to, not worry about the consequences. And maybe a couple of years goes by. Maybe you've gone to college and you've gotten out of college and gotten that piece of paper and you can't find a job. And maybe it's not because you can't find a job. Maybe it's because nobody wants to hire you because you don't possess the skill sets that they need, that you can't spell cat with a dictionary, or that you have to pull out your phone to do simple math, but you're a college graduate. So what do you do when you can't find a job and you want to be your own person and you're a grown ass man or a grown ass woman and you're going to do what you want to do because you're now an adult, and you go out there and you find out how hard it is, and you really realize that the electric bill that it comes in the mail each month actually has your name on it and that you're responsible for that bill, along with rent and food, insurance, car payment, and a plethora of other things that you have to be responsible for. So what does any college educated young adult do is they pack up their apartment and pick up their marbles and they go running back to mommy and daddy to move back in with them. And mommy and daddy have a child again, although it's 25 or 26 or 27-year-old child. And that child says, "Oh, I'm my own person. I can stay up as late as I want. I can play my video games, and I can go out on the protest because I don't have a job that I have to be at." But mommy and daddy are there to pick up the freight because mommy and daddy, maybe they have regrets on they gave you too much or not enough or whatever the case may be, but they feel that they have to. There's that word again, those two words, have to. They don't want to, they have to, because they can't imagine their child getting to the point to where they are responsible for themselves and might live out on the street, which is probably exactly where they need to be because they don't want to do what's required of them. They don't want the job where they have to start at the lower end of the hourly wage because I got a piece of paper that says I'm a college idiot, but I got no real skills other than this here. I know how to do a selfie. I know how to post things on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and make it look pretty and all of that. But really, I got no skill set. Well, why don't you get a skill set? Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to. I don't want to. That's too hard. That's not what I want to do. Even though you have to, in order to be a self-sufficient, productive adult slash good citizen in this country that contributes something to this great country. but they don't want to. And I don't understand that. I don't agree with it. I have clients that come in many times and they talk about their children and they're coming in to try to understand and that and really the people that person or the people that I need to be speaking with is not them. It's probably that 26, 27, 28-year old child. And I've had parents pay for sessions for them to come in and to for me to work with and that and I go into it with huge expectations because most of the kids, the young people that I meet are bright, but they lack the want to. They lack the social ability to interact with people because we've allowed them to go into their room, which I don't understand again because it's not their room, and close the door and create their own little world. And the young men don't date. They don't want a car. Many of them don't even want a driver's license, which again is completely foreign to me because I got my driver's license at 15 because I took driver's ed, although I was driving much younger than that. And I had a car at 16 that I paid for. Wasn't a great car. It was a car. It was a car you put a key in, you started it, made a noise, and it moved down the road. It wasn't the prettiest car in the parking lot, but I parked it next to cars that looked much like mine. Very few kids had new cars. The rich kids did. But we never focused on that. We never looked at and said, look what they have and that I should have that. Never did that. I remember getting that car and I wanted a car stereo for it because it only had an AM radio at that time, the little push button. You pull out you set your station, you pull it out and you push it in, and then you could push button it directly to the station that you wanted. You had the music blaring and that out of these tinny speakers in the dash that you'd have to lay on, put your ear on and lay on in order to hear it. So I wanted a stereo and speakers for that, for my car. So I went to the local Western Auto store and I found a radio, a stereo, and speaker set. I said, oh my gosh, I want this. But it was something that I couldn't afford at that time. So I took that and I put it in layaway. And I gave the cashier, the person there that owned the store, who ran the store, I gave him my $5 and said, I'll be back next week and put another $5 down. And I continued to do that until that radio was paid off. And maybe I got within 15 or $20 of having that thing paid off because at that time it was rather expensive considering that the minimum wage at that time was $2 and change. But I had other obligation. I had a car payment. I had to have insurance. I paid for my insurance. I had to pay for going out. I didn't get an allowance. I had chores at home that I had to do, but that was a contribution to the household because I lived there. There was never an expectation of getting an allowance. That had long passed. But I wanted that radio, so I took the money that I was going to go out during that weekend and paid my radio off. And then spent that weekend with a friend putting that radio in. And by Sunday afternoon, that radio was in and the music was blaring. And I remember my grandmother coming out onto the porch that was so loud at the time. She's hollering, turn that crap down. But that car could have been anything as long as it had that radio. But that was a want to. And it was also a have to because I had to have that radio. It was a have to, but I wanted that radio. It was a want to. Or maybe I picked up extra jobs, collected Coke bottles when I was a kid because that's back when Coke bottles were worth 2 cents, 3 cents, and at one time it got up to 5 and then 7 cents. And I would go to construction sites and pick up all the Coke bottles that the contractors or the construction people left behind because they didn't care. And I would get 20 or 30 or 50 Coke bottles and take them into the local Kroger, which I ended up working at, by the way. And I would make money that way. So the want to, how do you instill the want to into people, into young people? I don't know. But I do know this. I know it starts at home. It starts at home because they're your children, they're your family. And for me and with my children, the definition of a parent for me was not to be a friend. I wasn't interested in being a friend, although was, I approached things a little bit differently. But my role as a parent was to do a few things. My role as a parent was to get my children educated, provide them with a good set of morals, work ethic, to allow them to grow into productive adults that contributed to our society, to our country. And I'm happy to say that my children have accomplished that. I have, along with their mother, have accomplished that. And it was nothing that we had to think about. It was what we did. It was what we expected of our children. So I don't understand what the problem is. Maybe you should pull your children out of the school and homeschool them to where you can have control of them and understand what they need to learn. And then as you teach, you yourself learn. Maybe you need to make the sacrifice now to get them to the point to where they're productive adults and contribute to society and are good citizens to this country. Maybe you continue on the path that you are and your children never develop that want to, and God forbid they end up wanting to take the shortcut because they want those $400 sneakers because they want to spend time with their friends and not really be forced to be productive. I don't know. But I do know that the choice that and the responsibility lies with the parents, nobody else. The teachers have a hard enough time teaching overcrowded classrooms. And regardless whether you know it or not, there are some kids that are there that want to learn because they have greater aspirations for themselves to go to higher education or to get a better job or to live a better life, to live better than what their parents live, or maybe to get to a point in life where they can take care of their parents because of their sacrifices. But there are kids there that want to do that. And every disruptive kid that interferes with that classroom for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, much less the whole period, are stealing from everyone else. So that child, your child, is allowed to be a criminal for stealing that time because there's no consequences, because we don't want to hurt little Johnny's feelings or have him feel that he's less than anybody else. But want to. The want to. The have to and the want to. You can't teach it. You can't give it away. You can inspire it, but people have to have their own motivation to move forward with it. Because you control no one, even your kids, you don't control them. You can work on managing them, creating parameters, just like going to a job and your management sets up certain parameters for you to do your job, and they're going to manage you and say, look, you're shortfalling in this area. You need to step it up or that, because if you don't, you're not going to be here long because you're a drain on the resources of the company because you have to contribute minimums, just minimums. And if you choose to contribute more than minimums, then maybe that company will look at you for a raise, maybe even a promotion, because you've shown them that you're willing to go out and do more than what's necessary. But even if they don't, even if you're there for 5 or 10 years or working at McDonald's for the last 35 years, and all you've ever done was one job, you've developed a skill set, a marketable skill set that you can take and go maybe somewhere else to get a better job. But until you have that skill set, you're just a bag of skin that breathes, that takes up space, that needs to be told what to do and managed, or maybe even babysat, and maybe hold you to standards that should be a no-brainer, that you're there to work and it's an automatic thing that these are the things that you do. But yet people want to be congratulated and have accolades thrown on them for the things that they should have been doing anyway. That's part of their job. And I have a problem with that as well. I have a problem with this whole tipping culture, that you go into any place now and they've got a tip jar sitting there going, please, sir, money for the cheese, when they're doing the job for which they were hired to do. Now, I understand tipping. I understand going to a restaurant and paying for good service, not the food that was brought out from the kitchen, or that they had nothing to do with that, but for good service. But at the same time, I don't think that it's right for a restaurant to only pay the servers a minimum amount because they get tips. And my personal belief is those tips have nothing to do with you. If I'm going to work here, I want at least the minimum what the government says that I'm to be paid, or a person is to be paid a minimum wage, if that's it. Well, and I have a problem with minimum wage. But again, that's a different subject matter. But my tips, whether I get tips or not, have nothing to do with you. You should not that should not even come into the equation. That my tips that I get is a reflection on the good job that I'm doing servicing their clients, their clientele. So they should at least be willing to pay me or you or whomever the minimum. But I digress. That's a different subject. But the want to, that irritating want to. There's going to come a point in time in our society, in our country, that our lack of paying attention to these spoilt, whatever they call themselves nowadays, Gen Xers or X or whatever, is going to cause us a big problem. Oh, hold on, wait just a second. We're already there. We're already to that point. We're to that point to where there's lost generations that don't understand the want to or the have to be productive, self-sufficient members of society that contribute to this great country. So now that we're already there, how do we change that? How do we tilt that? Well, the only way to tilt that is for the people, for the parents that want to make sure that their children rise to the top out of all this mixture of stuff of everybody trying to make sure that everybody is treated the same. The only way for that to occur is for the parents to take charge of their education, homeschooling, small schools, private schools that cater to that. And it's unfortunate that that's where we are, but also for the parents to take responsibility and work with their children at home on skills, times tables, maybe memorizing times tables. That would be a good start. Allowing them to learn how to write in script or cursive writing, because that lack of doing that presents a whole different issue as well, which is again a different subject. But maybe teaching them or having them have to read books that are educational instead of sitting in front of the video games that contribute nothing. And you know what? You can talk to your blue in the face to me about video games and what it teaches and blah 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 blah. You know what? Go sell that dog to somebody else. Because personally, I've not seen anything of value come out of a kid spending hours and hours and hours in front of a video game, except for not going to bed on time, being tired when they go to school, and not wanting to do anything else except wanting to play video games. You see how this all circles back? It all circles back, and everything is connected. The solution is simple, but there are a few people that are going to be willing to take the time or make the effort to implement those simple solutions, as well as make your child adhere to them or faith or face the consequences or face the wrath. So, but I can tell you that when I was a business owner, then I hired people because I owned a business. I had at one time employed over 40 people. And I chose the people that I would hire, and there were people that walked in wanting a job that I wouldn't hire for all sorts of reasons. Some of them probably were against the law for me to make that decision based upon that, but it's my business. I wanted people that I'm not going to hire a problem. I want a team member. I want somebody who wants to. And I'm not looking for a person to walk in and go, oh, by the way, before we start this, when do I get vacation? Well, we're done. Have a nice life. See you later. Bye. I had visions of this video being somewhat of a short video, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, but that hasn't turned out that way because once I got started and things started rolling and my little pea brain started picking up on things, one thing led into the other, and which led us to 46 minutes and 18, 19, 20 seconds, and so on. But I'm going to end this now, and I'm going to ask people to think about the have to and the want to. Look at it in your own life right now. Look at the have to, and then look at ways to turn it into a want to, because when you want to do something, life is a little bit easier. And also, things will present themselves to you that maybe would not have had you not developed that desire or want to. So I will see you on the next episode of the Hypno Lions Roar, the podcast with teeth. I hope I struck a chord with you on this subject matter. So I say I bid you farewell, goodbye, have a blessed day, but above all else, make good choices.